Good afternoon. Welcome to the 41st CALLERLAB convention in Reno, Nevada. Today is April the 15th, Tuesday, April the 15th. And the name of this session is, what the hell is the name of the session? Site and Module Resolution Systems. My name is Barry Clasper. I'm the moderator for the session. I'm going to have a little bit to say at the beginning, but I'm going to be turning it over to Dottie Welch, who is going to do the real work. The session is actually intended to be sort of an introduction and an advertisement for a new document that is coming out. It's virtually out, but not quite yet, called the Site and Module Resolution Systems. It's a monumental piece of work that Dottie and her committee have produced. Dottie has not written this book all by herself. She's done something much more impressive. She herded a bunch of callers into contributing material and agreeing on how it should be presented and how it should be organized. And she's just done a terrific job of getting this all together. This book is just an outstanding piece of work, and it's a great piece of what's the word I'm looking for? Collateral to have in your kit bag. Now, having said that, it's a bit intimidating. In fact, one of the criticisms that came out early as this book was being put together is it's just too overwhelming. There's over 40 different systems that are described in this book. And they said even an experienced caller looking at that is just going to, their eyes are going to roll up into the back of their head and they're going to fall over. And especially a new caller, if you whap that on his desk while he's trying to learn to sight call, he's really going to have trouble coping with it. So I'm going to start the session with just a very quick introduction to sight calling principles. And what I'm attempting to do with that is to give you a framework that you can put all of these 40 different sight calling systems into. So it gives you a way to organize the stuff that's in the book. And actually the introductions to the book go into a lot of the same material. So I'm just kind of giving you a précis of what's there. But it gives you a way to organize what you're going to hear so that A, it makes better sense to you, and B, it gives you a way to choose the particular methods that might be most useful to you, because everybody's brain works a little differently, and some methods are going to work better for you than others. In fact, some might seem downright impossible to you, and others will seem really easy to you, but the reverse may be true of the guy sitting next to you. So having said all that, I'm going to launch into my part of the pitch, which I'm hoping is going to be like maybe 10 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dottie. But the way it usually goes when I start talking, it's probably going to be longer than 10 minutes. So if I go to 15, just cut me off wherever I am. So one of the handouts that just came around is called Sight Calling Principles or something like that. That's the one I wrote. And here's my take on sight resolution. What you do is you look at the square and you apply a memorized get out. That's it. That's sight resolution. And a lot of you are looking at me like, yeah, really? Now, I know it's not too helpful to just say it that way, but that is in fact what we're doing. Now, if you take any random setup in the square, let's take facing lines, just because we all can visualize facing lines. So any random collection of facing lines in a symmetric setup, how many permutations are there? That's a big word. How many different possible arrangements of the people could there be? 384. So how do you arrive at that? Well, if you imagine I've got 8 spots on the floor here that I can put people in, and I've got 8 people over here in the corner. So I decide I'm going to put somebody here. I can choose from one of 8 people to put there, correct? So I choose one of those 8 people. We're talking symmetric choreography. So that means that the opposite, the symmetric opposite of that person has to go over here, right? So I go through that collection. I've got 8 people to choose from to put somebody there. I've got 6 people to choose from to put somebody here. I've got 2 people, or 4 people rather, to choose here, and 2 there. It adds up to 384. So it's not really 384. It's not as bad as that, because in fact, half of those setups are just mirror images of one another. So there's really only 192. You could memorize that, right? 192 setups. So no, we can't memorize 192 setups. So what do? We start doing things to the square to reduce the number of possibilities that could be there. So what do? We do things like we put a particular person in a particular place, or we pair 2 people together, or we make the arrangement a certain way. So most systems will talk about first creating a usable formation, something that allows you to manipulate the dancers by moving them into specified places. So that could be lines for some, that might be 2-faced lines, it might be waves. You almost never see anybody attempt to resolve out of an hourglass, for instance, although there's no reason you couldn't if you had a memorized get out. But you create these formations because they have some utility in allowing you to move dancers around. Then what do? You create a normal arrangement, right? Why? If you take those facing lines and you force a normal arrangement, boy on the left, girl on the right, that reduces your 192 down to 32 possibilities. Reduced it a lot by doing that. And then if you pair a couple, that reduces it a bunch more. And if you put that couple in a particular place in the line, that takes you down to 4. And that's usually where we go with these methods, right? What we do is we create a usable formation, we create a normal arrangement, we pair some people, we put those people in a particular place, and that always leaves us with 4 possibilities. If we're just learning, we might actually try and cut that down to 2 possibilities. And you can do that just by, bringing the person's corner to a certain place and then looking to see who the corner happens to be paired with. But all of the methods, every single one of the methods, what they're really doing is they're just cutting down the number of possible snapshots that you have to have memorized. And then when you recognize a snapshot, you have a memorized get out from that snapshot. That's what all of these systems are doing. Am I over my 10 minutes yet? Great. So that's generically what they're doing. The big differences, you hear people talk about the 2-face line method, right, and the ocean wave method. Nobody talks about the hourglass method, although you could build one. What they're really doing is they're just tagging the general formation that they chose to put the people in originally to do the initial manipulations. They're talking about the way that you're going to maneuver the dancers through those steps of creating the arrangement and pairing the people and putting them in a particular place. And you may be working with lines, or you may be working with an 8-chain, or you may be working with waves. And the difference between all of those is simply the calls that you can use to move the dancers around. And you need to move the dancers around in fairly generic, predictable ways. You need to be able to do things like trade places with somebody. You need to be able to pair dancers. You need to be able to move a boy, exchange 2 boys or exchange 2 girls. You need to be able to put people in a particular place in the formation. So whenever you're considering what kind of method you're going to use for, you need to ask yourself, what techniques do I know if I'm working with that formation that lets me trade people and exchange people's places and put particular pairs in particular places? what calls do I have available from that formation that lets me create an arrangement and then keep it while I'm doing all the other things. So those are the kinds of tools that you need to have in order to work with any of these formations. The other thing that all the methods require is that you be able to see certain things in the square in order to make decisions about what you're going to do next. My personal bugbear is sequence. I can't see sequence. As soon as somebody starts writing up a resolution method that says, are they in or are they out? I go, I have no clue. Now that doesn't mean I couldn't figure it out, right? I understand. It's kind of like, you know, some people have trouble with right and left. True, right? I mean, anybody who's taught a beginner class knows there's lots of people who have trouble with right and left. And it's not that they can't figure it out. It's that they don't have that instinctive reaction that lets them figure it out in half a second while they're dancing. That's how much time you get to make those kinds of decisions. Same is true when you're calling. If you can't see sequence without pausing and saying, okay, if this person is over there and that means they're in. You know, if you have to go through that, then that having to detect that is useless to you as a sight caller. You have to go another way. Most people can either see who is standing in a particular place. So you ask yourself, if I put my key people in a certain place, I can ask questions about who is standing in front of them and make decisions about that. Other people find it easier to say, well, I know the 4 people that I memorized. I can look at the square and see what shape they're in. So let's say I put my key people on the outside of an 8 chain. That's often where they wind up, right? So I got my keys on the outside of an 8 chain. Do I ask questions about the people that are standing in those positions, or do I ask where the corners are? Are they lined up like this? Are they lined up like that? You know, they make different shapes in the square. If that's what makes sense to you, if that's what you can see on the fly, then go with a method that emphasizes that lets you ask questions that way. So, any questions on what I've said so far? That's just the setup. Dottie is about to continue. Okay, without any further ado, Dottie Welch. And by the way, if you do have questions, please come up and use the microphone.
One, two, three, four. There we go. All right. So what you have in your hand is, as it says, excerpts from the document. This is the document. This is 220 pages. And so you've got, I don't know, 50 or 60 or something, I can't remember, 44 pages excerpt from the document. And what I've tried to do in the excerpts here is to give you some sense of what's there. As Barry already said, there's more than 40, depends on how you're counting, more than 40 different site and module resolution systems documented here. In addition to that, there is a significantly sized section at the beginning that talks about all those preliminary skills that you need to have in order to apply most of those site resolution systems. For instance, you need to be able to pair. So how do you pair and how do you do it efficiently? You need to understand about Allemande left positions and where you're headed. You need some information about how many options there are, and let's kind of start there. So if you look in here at page 8, Barry was just talking about this, and he started with 384 different positions that he could plunk those dancers down in, and then he pointed out that, all right, you start cutting it down, and if one of the things you do to cut it down is say, all right, I don't want boy, boy, girl, girl, or girl on the left and boy on the right. I want only formations where everybody's normal couples. Then, and that we do that. We do that on a regular basis. Normalize. Okay, so we normalize that situation. We are now down to 16. That sounds a whole lot better than 384. A whole lot better than 384. Now, even this, I mean, in the course of writing this document, one of the very interesting things was how differently people think about this process. Because I had some of our well-known site callers say, that's useless. We don't need to have that in the document. I think it's really useful. And that points out something that I have tried to do here. I have not tried to say this is the best way or that is the best way or you should do this or you should do that. What I have tried to do here is document what people are thinking without passing judgment. Just document what they're thinking. If some tool is useful to some callers, then I could document, I could understand what they were doing, I put it here. So I don't expect any one person to be able to actually use all 40 of these applications because some of them are not going to be your style. And that's fine. That's fine. Hopefully, some one of them will be your style. And if we've achieved that, if we've given you enough information to find the one thing that works for you, then it was a success. So it's kind of like an encyclopedia that you go to and look up things and see what finds that's appropriate for you. So here we are. We're down to 16. Now let's look at the 16 for a minute. You may not have thought about this. How many of you have actually diagrammed all 16 and sat there looking at them? Anybody? One person. Two people. Okay. All right. Well, let me show you why I think this is important. Okay. So, if you look on the next page, on page 9, you'll see I have asked the question, first of all, how frequently are all 4 couples paired? Well, if you go back to page 8 and look for all 4 couples paired, you will see that 1A and 1B have all 4 couples paired. So that's 2 out of the 16, or 1/8 of the time. And then you ask yourself, how frequently are exactly 2 couples paired? Then you will see 2 couples paired. All right, let's see, where are we here? That's going to be 5A and 5B and 6A and 6B. So that's 4/16, or 1/4 of the time. All right. How frequently is there a potential partner pair within half of the square? And by that I mean, if I allow you to do a ladies chain or a flutter wheel or reverse the flutter wheel or something that changes the partner pairing within the 4 dancers, how frequently will there be at least one pair? Well, all those ones I've just listed certainly fall in that category. And in addition to that, 2A, for instance, if we did a ladies chain, then the man 4 and lady 4 would be together, so you'd have your pair. And 3A, no, there's no way. That's a toughie. What about 4A? Yes, ladies chain will do it, and so will 4B, because these are matched up across here, so that the only difference between the left-hand side and the right-hand side is a right and left through. So the dancers are in both of them. The same dancers are in both. 5A and 6A we already included. 7A, can we pair them up? Not easily. What about 8A? Yeah, we can get to all of them paired pretty quickly. So, if you look at all of those, that's 12 out of the 16. Hey, that's pretty encouraging information, because if you have at least one pair, most of you probably, if you already know some site call system, are pretty close to resolving. True? Yeah. So 12 out of the 16 situations here are relatively easy. Did you know that? 12 out of the 16 normal facing lines are going to lead you pretty easily to a resolution. And there's only 4, and that's the case where everybody has their opposite, that are a bit of a challenge. So if you learn how to deal with those 4 and turn them into a pair without too much challenge, then life should be not too difficult. Make sense? So that's why I think that graph is useful. Now, that's one reason. And the second reason is that if you're testing a system that you're kind of thinking about, you need to be able to apply it to all 16 of those and know what to do. So I find myself saying, okay, I'm thinking about it this way. Can I do it here? Could I do it here? Could I do it here? Could I do it here? And if I can, I know that it's going to work no matter what I'm faced with, as long as the dancers don't make a mistake. Okay? So that's why I think that's a confidence builder. That's a big confidence builder in my mind, because it gives you confidence that whatever you're thinking about is going to work all the time, and it also says, hey, this can't be that difficult. Okay, so that's in the very first chapter, or the second chapter. The first chapter is really introductory information. If I go back a little bit here, you'll see that I've put a table of contents here that's very similar to what's in the document. It lists the kinds of things that are there. This one just lists what's in this document, this extract document. And the first chapter is an introduction of the purpose of this, which Barry and I have already kind of outlined for you, a general overview of what's coming, and you'll notice at the bottom that I've said the complete document is 220 pages, study guide for beginning. Site callers is included, very important thing, because one of the points of resistance was this is going to be overwhelming, especially for a brand new site caller. And I tried to make sure that there were some guidelines there to help the brand new site caller figure out where to look first and what to do first and what to ignore, because that was just going to confuse the issue. And so that's there. 60 pages about terminology, modules, and skills needed. So that's all this introductory information I was talking about. The 40 systems, and then at the very end of the document, there's 40 pages of get-outs, kind of what Barry was talking about. Those memorized resolutions from a place you recognize, but going a bit further, going into the snapshot idea that, okay, if they're in a certain position, I can do a Dixie Grant. Or if they're in a certain position, I can do a cast a shadow into a promenade, or whatever. And that is sorted by formation and arrangement, and then the get-outs are given everything from basic to C2 examples. A lot of information there, which you might use in multiple ways. Because even if you're writing choreography, you can say, oh, I've got him to this formation. Is there a neat get-out I can use? There it is. That kind of information is in some of our choreography programs, but it's presented here for those who don't have those programs. So then we proceed. We go the 16 sequences. There's a section I've put in here showing the different element left phasers. And in case you're wondering, yes, phaser is carefully defined in the full document. How many of you do not understand what I'm talking about when I talk about phasers? Everybody got that far in this process? Good. Then the third chapter looks at modules. And initially, okay, you might be asking yourself, why is it called site and module resolution systems? Because even if you're site calling from the first call and you site, at some point in the process, as Barry's already said, you bring those dancers to a place you recognize, and then a module resolution that you've memorized. It might be no more than, oh, promenade. Short module. It might be no more than that. Or, oh, you're home. Right? But in some sense, there's always going to be a module involved. Now, as we wrote the document, and the document includes some discussion of isolated site, and it includes some discussion of crams, it became obvious to me that we needed a section that talked about modules in more detail than just the get-ins and the get-outs, because those terms were being tossed around and they needed to be properly defined. So there is a fairly significant chapter that talks about get-ins and get-outs, equivalents, zeros, the chicken plucker, four-line resolution, so four dancers facing line, normal couples, similar to the chicken plucker, but done instead of in the 8 chain through, done from 0 lines, or variations on that. Invert and rotate modules, technical zeros, all that kind of stuff is in the module chapter. So you can go into it a little bit, or you can go into it in more detail, depending upon whether you are good with modules and like to use modules, or whether you'd rather they just went away. But so that's there. And then we start with the beginning of the true resolution systems. And the very first ones are in a chapter that is titled Controlled Site and Module Resolution Systems. Everybody hear me back in the back there? I'm getting quite a bit of competition here. All right, how are we doing? So what I mean by controlled site and module systems is something where you say, for instance, isolated site. You say head square through 4. You put them so that everybody's facing their corner, and then you consciously restrict yourself to 2-couple choreography. So that's the controlled aspect of it, that I'm not going to let them get too far away from their corner. All right, I'm going to control what I call. I'm not going to let myself totally freewheel. And you bring them back to face your corner again, and there's your resolution. So that's your isolated site. So that falls in that category. Burnt image falls in that category. And as you can see, there's a little bit of isolated site discussed there. I gave you here some excerpts so you can get some sense of what kinds of things are in the book. I tried to put all of any one system in here so that if you wish to carry it away and use just this, the whole little piece is there. I tried not to chop thing up and leave you hanging and say, oh, well, what am I going to do to get them home? You should be able to do that from what's here. Then, and that chapter also includes crams, pretty much the same kind of information that is out there already. You probably, if you've investigated crams already, received a very similar kind of document to what's been put in this document. Then we go to chapter 6, which is named Unlimited Classic Resolution Systems. So I'm now up on page 18. If you have lost me, I'm up to page 18, chapter 6. This is a combination of several variations on what is started out described here as the generalized description of the classic resolution system. So this is the one where people say, all right, we're going to make 2 face lines, or we're going to make facing lines, and we're going to do a Ferris wheel or a pass-through and a wheel and deal, and zoom if we need to, with the goal being that we want a paired couple on the outside and an unpaired couple in the middle. There's one possibility. The others are facing lines. So we get the paired couple outside, unpaired in the middle, and then we do a pass-through or a square through 3. That's your underlying concept. Now, how you achieve the initial pairing, how you, whether you start from the 2 face lines, you start from the facing lines, whether you worry about, I want man number 1 on my left-hand end, and I want his corner across from him, and nothing else will do. Okay, how restricted you want to be, or how freewheeling you want to be, is the difference between the various versions that are in there. And how many of you use this system, or some variation of it? All right, so let me show you. If you already do that, how many of you do it using a dive through? Anybody? Okay, so let me get a square up here for a moment, if I can do that. And this is going to be a challenge because I see almost all men in the room, so we're going to have to think about partners and corners here. All right. Yeah. All right, we did. So I'm going to. I hope all of you can think about it this way, since that's not quite a norm, what we call a normal couple over there. I'm going to leave them out of the running in terms of corner here. He does. Well, I could do that, but yeah, all right, we can do that. So Barry and Mr. Sash over here are corners with each other. All right, and we've got partner pairings. Okay, sorted out here. So if we had head ladies chain across and side sleeve right and veer to the left and bend the line. All right, so we've got a case. Where are we in this number of possibilities here? We got paired couple, unpaired couple. Okay, so this is a case where this is going to apply. Now, remember that this is a subset of that generalized description. So ultimately, we're heading for wanting to have the paired couple on the outside. So let me have the ladies chain across and do a right and left through. So at this point, what I'm seeing in my mind is that I have my paired couple now facing each other across the middle. Okay? And the ones on the end are not paired. So here's where the dive-through application comes in. I want this couple to be on the outside, star through the center's arch, and dive through. All right? What do we need to do to get Barry to Mr. Sash? Square through 3. Alaman left. All right. So I put that paired couple facing each other in the middle with the unpaireds on the outside, and that allowed me to call star through, center's arch, dive through, and now the paired couple's on the outside. Can you all see that? And once you're there, you're back to your standard classic application. Okay, thank you. So that's the dive-through application. That's yours. Yes. All right. Chapter 7. So now, this chapter I've designated as resolving using specific calls. So in the other one, although the other one probably asks you to use wheel and deal or Ferris wheel in most applications, here are examples. For instance, the first one, which came from Tim Mariner, essentially is keyed on recycle. So what does that mean about if you're calling the basic list? Forget this one. Forget this one. We can't use this one because this is keyed on recycle. It really depends upon recycle. So this is gone if you're calling the basic list. You've got to be calling the mainstream list, and you have to have dancers that can dance recycle with fair degree of accuracy. It's a standard recycle. He's not doing anything weird with it. It's just ordinary right-hand waves, ladies in the center recycles, but they do need to be able to do that. I believe it may point out that you can also do it left-handed with the ladies on the ends, but you have to come back to the normal couples. So this is your recycle variation. And I know we will run out of time if I go through long details, so I'm pointing out to you what's happening here. And then also in this chapter, well, first of all, if we turn the page here, I have made a point, and you can see why quite immediately, of including in here where I could and where it applied an alternative view that would make the description accurate for a woman caller. Now, I'm seeing almost all men out here, but let me explain to you what happens in a woman's head when she's told that she must call as if she were a man. And perhaps you guys can appreciate this if you think about what would happen in your head if I said, you have to do this as if you were a lady. So, when I was first taught to sight call, it was, you have to think about the man and his corner. I had already been dancing for 10 years at that point. And I'm sorry, but I had danced as a lady, and my corner was over here. And it was not a simple thing for me to think on the fly when I'm worrying about all the other things that have to do with choreography. Corner's not here, he's over there. And where's his partner? Over there even further. Or her partner, or whoever. I mean, your brain just kind of goes, ugh. So, after about a year, thankfully, I talked to somebody who said, no, you don't have to do that. Because if you think about the symmetry of the situation, I really didn't have to do that. I can resolve just as well thinking about the woman and her corner as I could thinking about the man and his corner. And the only problem comes when I'm faced with talking to a whole room full of men. Okay, because then I have to translate. But it's much easier for me to translate under those conditions than it is for me to translate night after night after night when I'm calling to my dancers. So, in the document, there is a discussion wherever the description would make a problem in the woman's mind because it is keyed on the man and his corner. There's a discussion as to how she might think about the same kind of process and use the idea in a way that's appropriate for her. So that's in there. Somebody, a question? Did somebody have a question? Yeah. Yep.
Mike Turner, Wichita, Kansas. To emphasize Dottie's point, and a good exercise for all of these gentlemen as callers, is to dance the lady's part and think about doing it as if you were calling, dancing that Belle's part in the square, and you gain a better perspective on what she's talking about.
Yeah. One of the most difficult things, a lot of the time I dance on the floor to fill in whatever hole that I have. So if I'm dancing with a remote mic and I have to dance the man's part, I have to really think about what I'm doing when I do that. Okay, so that's that chapter. The other applications that are tucked in that chapter are two variations that use the swing through, turn through to your corner version, which is again something that you have to be calling mainstream if you're going to use turn through. So, but they're also in that section. Then we come to a chapter which says, all right, how about pairing all four couples? The first one that's in here is, and you don't see it here, but the first one that's in this chapter is a system that came to me via Clark Baker from Dave Wilson. And his system is to take ocean waves, use trades and circulates and AC-doocy to pair every couple in that square. He doesn't worry initially about whether it's right-handed waves or left-handed waves, girls in the center or girls on the ends, but pair every couple in the square. And then he has, from all the possible variations you might have, so in sequence or out of sequence, right-handed or left-handed, girls in or girls outside, boys in, boys outside. There's a long list of get-outs that you can memorize that will take you home. For instance, you can imagine that if you have everybody paired, it's a right-hand wave, and the girls are the end and the boys are in the middle, in sequence, grand, right, and left. Okay, and so and the applications go all the way from basic up to C2 as they do everywhere else. Now, when I was writing that one up, it occurred to me that I know people do this from two-faced lines. Because as a dancer, I've experienced that a fair number of times over my dancing career. So there's one in here, no credit given, because I have no clues who came up with this first, but I was aware that it was happening, so I wanted to document it. And that is, okay, so why can't we pair all four couples in a two-faced line? It's really not more complicated than it is to do it from a wave. It's still trades and circulates which does it. You get them all paired. How far away from getting it resolved are you at that point? Very close. There's no need to go to facing lines. If they're all lined up, what happens? Well, if they're in normal couples and it's a right-handed two-faced line, there's two options. They're in sequence or they're out of sequence. Okay? So if they're in sequence, what do you need to do to resolve it? Partner trade and promenade, or California twirl and promenade. If they're out of sequence, what do you need to do? Couples trade, and then you'll have to turn them around and promenade them. All right? So of all the systems, somebody asked me when I did a session early on in this process, what was most efficient? This is the most efficient as far as I'm concerned, because once you get it into some kind of normal lines, never mind any pairing, once you get into some kind of normal two-faced lines, if you use the most efficient pairing system that's out there, which is also documented, 4 moves, 4 calls is the most you would need to be promenading. And that's pretty efficient. That's pretty efficient. So that's that one. And in here I do document the pairing process if you're interested in chasing that one down. The essential idea, now this is something that maybe you haven't thought of, so maybe I'll talk about this for a second here. If you had paired couple and unpaired couple, and your goal is to have everybody paired, okay, I maintain that the fastest way to do this is to recognize the fact that if you have a paired couple and an unpaired couple, the sequence of the girls is different from the sequence of the boys. I want them to be in the same sequence. That's a must if they're all going to be paired. Fastest way to achieve that is to trade the center dancers. Okay? And then, so do that first if you've got that situation, and then look to say, all right, who do I have to move? And it'll be either the centers or the ends, if they're not already all paired. Centers of the ends will have to circulate, and you'll be there. But you have to recognize, and that's not always easy to see, but if you understand the underlying principle, if you've got a pair and an unpair, trade the centers, they're all going to be in the same sequence. Then you only have to move to line them up with their partner, and everybody will be lined up. And then we've already talked about how easy it is to resolve from that point. So that's that one. Chapter 9. Resolving towards specific goals. Okay, so this came from, and the chapter is primarily Daryl Clendenin's system. How many of you know something about Daryl Clendenin's resolution system? Some? I will admit that of all the systems that I put in here, Daryl's was the most challenging one for me to figure out and document. We had a lot of emails between the East Coast and the West Coast in my process of doing this one. And along the way, I realized that there was an underlying concept to Daryl's system that I had named fundamental tools, fundamental tool 1 and fundamental tool 2. So I've documented for this piece that you've got fundamental tool 1. Here's the underlying idea. If you have some kind of A-chain through or facing line situation, and you look down there and you see in one half of the square, so within 4 dancers, if you look down there and see a known pair from your key couple and a corner to one of those dancers, and the other one's not the corner to, not the partner to that known corner. So you see, in essence, 3 of your 4 key dancers, all right? A partner pair and a corner. If you see 3, then how far are you from making a 0 box? Not far. Not far. Because you've got all the ingredients you need. All you have to do is do some moving of bodies within those 4 dancers to put the pair on the outside and the corner, known corner, in front of their corner. Okay? So, that's the underlying root of Darrell's system, that if you can see 3 of the 4 known dancers and the other one's not, your 4th one, then some 2-couple choreography will put you in a 0 box. That is a very powerful tool. We're not saying anything about what choreography you might use to get them there. We're just saying, it's there. Can you see it? Now, for some people, that might be quite intimidating because you don't see it easily. But for others of you, you might say, oh, all I've got to do is a whatever, ladies chain or star through or flutter wheel or whatever. And there they are. Boom. There's your corner. Why make it any more difficult than necessary? So that's fundamental tool 1. If you see 3, you don't need to mess around. You don't need to go facing lines and wheel and deal and move them all around. All you have to do is figure out what 1 or 2 calls you need to get them into that 0 box position. Does that make sense? Might not be easy, but hey, light bulb. In my mind, that was a light bulb. Wow. Hey. The fundamental tool is the same concept, but it's for facing lines. So if you look down in that box and you see all 4 of your key dancers, you want, technically, if you think about what happens when you have facing lines, at the very end, after you say you've got facing lines and you star through and you either do a square through 3 or a pass through, you're in a trade by element left phasor. Yes? So, if you have all 4 couples there, you've got to put them in that trade by element left phasor. And that's the same deal. You only have to move those 4 bodies around until you get them there. All right. Chapter 10. How am I doing? Quarter 2? Quarter 2, I think. Yeah, quarter 2. We're doing fine. We're doing fine. All right. Chapter 10, resolutions when using a limited call list. When using limited call lists. All right, so what happened here, and this, I'll tell you the underlying story here. Way back when, I started as an advanced caller. I learned to sight call to advanced callers. Then I inherited a plus club, and then I inherited a mainstream club, so I can work my way down the list. And eventually I found myself teaching beginners. Well, I already knew how to sight call. But of course, I'd learned to sight call to advanced callers, and as I'd worked my way down, I learned, okay, I can do this without cast a shadow, but, you know, I do it with the plus calls, and then, well, I used to use Dixie Graham, but I can't do that, so I've learned how to do it with the mainstream calls, and I worked my way down, and I can do it with the basic calls, but when somebody took away wheel and deal and Ferris wheel, I'm saying, okay, how do I do it now? And I went to the people that had taught me how to call and said, all right, how do you do this? And they said, we don't sight call, we use modules. And I'm thinking, well, okay, you could use modules, but that's not my style. I already sight call. There must be a way to do this. So I set out to figure out what it was, since nobody seemed to be able to tell me. And there is, actually, my system is in here. Also, a gal from Great Britain contributed to one, and that's the very first one that's in here. So remember Barry saying, I'm not good with sequence? And I feel the same way. I'm not good with sequence either. Her system's fine, but it really depends on your being able to see sequence easily. And I didn't know about her system, but she's doing something very similar to what I was doing, but not quite the same thing. And so how many of you are faced with that same problem? You're teaching beginners. They know nothing. How do you resolve it? What do? Use lots of circles. Yeah. I mean, you can always fall back on the circle choreography, and you can fall back on the module stuff. But surely there must be a way to resolve this. Yes, there is. You need nothing more than ladies chain, pass through, and bend the line. That'll do it. That'll do it. Would you like to try this? We got enough time. Can I get a square up here? One more. Yeah, well, maybe we should switch back. So we have the same. Can we do that? Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Sash, so he has the same corner. Yeah, different part. Well, I'll live with Bill. That's okay. We can do that. All right. So we're calling simple stuff. So let's do ladies chain. No, I'm sorry. I should have said head ladies chain. That's okay. Head ladies chain back here. Sorry. All right. Now, let me have side couple, circle. Let's say circle to the left 3/4. 1, 2, 3. And pass through. All right. And then let me use star through for the moment so you can see. So star through here. Okay. So we get them to the normal couple situation. And then we look at this, what we've got here. So in this case, Chris and Barry are partners. All right. Sash and Bill are apart. So we've got paired couples facing in the middle and unpaired couples facing on the end. So this is the same kind of situation I had when I was doing that dive-through resolution. Same kind of situation as from that one. If you think back a minute, when I had them facing in the middle and unpaired on the ends, I could do a star through, center's arch, dive through, and I'm to the one. So actually that dive through resolution is a good solution to this problem if you've gotten as far as dive through. All right, let's assume we haven't gotten as far as dive through. So the next thing that I want to look at is I've got the paired couple facing in the middle, and I want to look at the key corner that I know about, which is Mr. Sash and Barry. Are they adjacent? Yes. Okay. I will maintain that if the centers are facing, partner pair is facing in the middle, and the corners are adjacent, that all I need to do is join hands and circle to the left, all 8. All 8. And what do I need to do to get... Yeah, roll away. And there they are. There they are. So what did I do? I looked at those 16 sequences there. You can sit. So you've got the idea of what's going on. I'm going to talk about here. I looked at those 16 possibilities and said to myself, okay, what do I need to recognize in order to be able to identify sequence in another way besides seeing, Barry, girl, part, are they in sequence or not? And I realized that you could do that by that test that I just gave you. Facing in the middle, partners facing in the middle, not paired on the end, and partner and corner adjacent. And if you see that, they're all in sequence. If you don't see that, but you still have them facing in the middle and corner, not corner adjacent, they're out of sequence. If they're out of sequence, what do you need to do? Right and left through, and then they will be in sequence. Circle to the left, and in that case, it's going to be a ladies' center, men's sachet. Wow. That doesn't require very much to resolve. Now, if you are accustomed to always putting partner pairs side by side, it will take some adjustment in your mind to think, okay, I can do something with partners facing across the middle. That's a mental shift, especially if you've been thinking the other way all the time. But that's not an impossible mental shift. That's, okay, I need to have her over there. I got to do either ladies chain or right and left through, or maybe pass through and bend the line if they don't know right and left through yet. And I can get them in that position. So that's that one. Then we come to Chapter 11. So this one is systems that primarily sort by sequence. So here we have the callers who see sequence easily. The callers who see sequence easily. And the one that I've chosen to put in here is something that came from, I think it's Doug Machulik. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. He's a European caller. And what he's seeing is the one that's actually here. He's showing you, when you look at the diagrams, put everybody in sequence. So that means that you have to be able to see that, okay, the men are in sequence, and not necessarily with any partner pairing, but the ladies are also in sequence. And if you see that, the only thing you're going to have to do, I mean, one option is what I just did. Everybody circle to the left and either roll away or ladies center, men sachet, and you're going to have them back. The other options are some kind of pass-through, trade-by, because you'd have to move them, keeping them all in that same circular order, but move them until they come to their partner. And then you do a box and that and a right and left grand, or a pass-through and an element left, or whatever is necessary. Once you know that you've got partners right beside each other, it's not too hard to figure out some way to resolve. And so he goes through the options, and you can see if you look here. So if you look at the bottom, I'm on the bottom of page 34 here, and he just clarify here. He says, let us denote our key men A and B with their original partners being A and B, so that A was the one who was originally standing clockwise from B. Clockwise from B. So that means you might be thinking as A was your secondary couple and B was your primary couple if you normally think man one. And so just to clarify that, that's the way it came to me, and I left it that way. So if you look at the example in A, we have everybody in sequence, and A and B, lady A and man B were in fact the original corners, so all you'd have to do is an element left. And then if you look at the next one below, so now we've moved them a little bit. Gentleman A and gentleman B are still in the same place, but the girls are over on the other side. So he says, okay, pass through, trade by, box the gnat, and grand right and left. So he's just arguing that you get them all in sequence, then you just have to move them in a circular way to get them back to their partner. That's great if you can see the sequence to begin with. I find that hard. How many of you find that easy? Anybody? Anybody see sequence easily? No, challenge. But I understand what he's doing. Even if I can't achieve it, I understand what he's doing. All right, then we have a chapter that looks at resolving when you want to resolve at home, and a similar process, resolving when you want to stir the bucket, or a subtly different process, resolving during a singing call. All right, so how many of you use at-home resolutions? Some do. All right, so there's some discussion here about some simple applications. For instance, at the bottom here, if you look at the position we've got them in here, an example where it says B, which in this case stands for basic resolution. Ferris wheel and the center star through and back away at home. You see that? And it goes through some others. And stirring the bucket, of course, is the same basic concept, except that you're moving them one position, so you have to get them home in a different spot. And there's some nice stir the bucket examples there if you're looking for such. And it also discusses resolving during a singing call, making no qualms about the fact that you probably don't want to do that until you've mastered the resolving process when you're not singing, because there's extra issues like timing and getting them where they should be when they're supposed to be there. But, yeah, so that's there. And then, what do you do when things have gone wrong? Various fixes for caller or dancer error. So, some suggestions. You think you've got them in the right sequence, and you realize as they're promenading that, oops, I didn't do that right. So what do? And that standard wheel around is there, and some other possibilities that people use. Or your key square has broken down, and you have some clues about who's partners, but you're not sure who's corners in some other square. So there's an example here for unknown corners. So by using the right-hand star, and classic trick, okay, let the dancers figure out who their corner is, because you don't really have a clue. Yes. How many have been there? Yes. All right. And then we come to the very last one. And what I chose to put in the get out section is two things. The first one, which is probably the most common get out application that you will use, and that is, all right, I've gotten the dancers to a 0 line. How do I get them from the 0 line to promenade or to home? And there's a whole bunch of examples there. So that's something that you might be able to glom onto right off the bat and carry away and use. You all understand what I'm talking about there? And then we go into more detailed snapshots here. So suppose you had them in parallel waves, and the first example I've done here is parallel right-hand waves where trade the wave would resolve. This is one that I find relatively easy to recognize, because what I see when I'm looking at them is, oh, I've got partner pairs, but they're facing out instead of in. And they're holding on to their corner. So, and I've got a right-hand wave. I want a left allemande. So if I do trade the wave, that'll put the ones who are facing out, facing in, and switch them over, and all will be well, and I can call allemande left. Makes sense? And by the way, if you're calling A1, you can call mix instead of trade the wave, and works just as well. So there's some other possibilities there. You can also call girls cross run and the boys trade, which is mix, by the way. And I think I've got one more here, and that's the get outs from a double pass through. And in this particular case, I have the paired couple in the center with their corners behind them, or that they're in front of their corner. And for those of you that are plus callers, that is the Dixie Grand resolution position. So that's a recognizable snapshot, and go with it. And if you know that, then you can recognize that when you're calling mainstream. And what can you call? Yes, zoom square through 3. What else could you call? Making use of the fact. Yes. What else can you call? No. I don't. No, because you can't. They can't all begin. That's what Dixie Grand does for you. But yeah, what about double pass through? And what's left to be done? Leader's trait. Okay. So if you recognize it at plus, you've got to get out at mainstream as well, or in basic for that matter. Okay. And then there's an index, a comprehensive index. I hate documents without indices in them, so I put the index in, and that's what we've got. Comments, questions?
Actually, just before we go on to questions from the audience, let me just bring you up to date on where we are with publishing this. So it's been through the EC and the board. It's all approved. It's going up on the website. Here's the way that we're probably going to handle this. It'll go up on the website in the members-only section. You can download it from there for nothing. It will be available in hard copy from the home office, both to members and to non-members. Members will pay whatever printing and shipping costs, and we're not exactly sure what that is at the moment, but basically we'll just recover our costs for members. We'll add some additional premium for non-members. We're suspecting that a lot of people will order the hard copy because it's 225 pages or whatever it is. But members will be able to download it from the website.
If you only want one part. Yep. If basically you only want to print 2 or 3 sections, then you can download and print the pieces that you want and leave the rest of them sitting on your computer or whatever. So, it's up to you.
Yeah, so you can, read it online and then print the parts that you want to be able to study in bed and stuff. Not exactly sure when that's going to happen. Hopefully really soon. And so once Dana's got it up on the website in a place where you can get at it, we'll send an electronic flash out. It might be the flash that comes out after convention. There's always a flash that comes out after convention telling people what happened during convention. So don't just gloss over that. Read through it and make sure that the announcement of where this document is and how it's available isn't in there. But hopefully it's going to be available immediately, in the next week or two after we get back from convention.
And the other thing that I'm hoping to do, and it may turn out to be this document that lands there, is to put some excerpts on the open part of the site so that people can that's the teaser, if you'd like, so they can see what's there and know that maybe it's worth ordering this document.
So are you thinking maybe this document,
maybe
the handout, would be the teaser
possibly.
document?
Yeah.
So if, it's likely we're going to do that. That sounds like a good suggestion. So that means that we'll have everybody, non-CALLERLAB members and CALLERLAB members alike, perhaps downloading this thing you've got as a handout from the website. Some of them will think this is the whole document, despite the fact that it says it's excerpts. So just be on the lookout for that. If you find some of your colleagues thinking that that's all there is, make sure you disabuse them of that notion. Henry?
You might want to cut down the excerpts a little bit. Henry Griffith from Los Angeles. I was just saying, and to make it a real good teaser, you might want to cut down the amount that you put on there as the excerpts. Don't put the whole 44 pages, but put a portion of that on. That way, they're more likely to believe that it's not the whole thing.
That could be done. Our intention is to put something on there as a teaser, though, so that everybody can see what's there. Certainly, I don't want this to go sit in a dusty corner. I want it to be used. It should be.
The excerpts certainly should be. The document itself won't be, but it'll be downloadable once we've got it up on the website. The teaser is on the thumb drive.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes. We have questions. You're all... Oh. Applause is certainly appropriate, but apparently it's not over yet. Stephen has a question.
Dottie, this is Steve Nosek from Puyallup here. I was wondering when you made the comment when you were site calling and being a woman, I think most of the guys in this room would think that sometimes our prime couple is not the man of the number one couple, but the lady of the number one couple, just because that's the strength. So don't we use what you've been doing all the time, that the lady, the number one lady, hello, pal, the number one lady is usually the stronger of the primary couple, perhaps, and don't we do what you've been
Perhaps you do and perhaps you don't, because you may still think to yourself, okay, I'm going to use that lady in her corner, but then you may find yourself thinking of that lady's corner as your primary man. So maybe yes and maybe no. It depends. And some systems don't emphasize that. All you really need to know is, okay, these are partners and these are corners, and the other aspects of whether it's these two or these two don't make any difference. So in that case, as I said, it's only the cases where they do emphasize that difference that I put something about how a woman would adapt.
I'd like to ask a question just for yucks. Theory says that you can key on any 4 adjacent dancers, right? If they all join hands, you could pick any 4 dancers and they could be your keys. Wouldn't matter where they were. Does anybody use something other than, a key couple in their corner? Does anybody, for instance, cut the square in, like if I'm number one couple, would you cut the square in half that way and deal with number one man's corner and number one lady's corner as your,
Guess what?
Anybody do that?
Guess what?
We got a couple to do that.
Yes, and there's actually a system in here that does that.
Neat. Really different way to look at the square. What I find really interesting about looking at these different methods is whatever way you have of conceiving the square as you're resolving, if you pick up one of these methods that forces you to look at the square in a different way, then you start to see different patterns, and all kinds of new resolution snapshots open up for you as you get used to working this new system. Yeah. It's just a tremendous motherlode of data here in this document.
Yeah, and it certainly changed the way I cycle. I'm studying all of this different stuff. I find myself saying, oh, I can do a little bit of Darrow system. I can do that system. Oh, I can use this one. Because I've studied them, I've worked with them enough. I can't do all of them. Those ones with the sequences, I understand what they're doing, but I'm unlikely to see that. But it certainly has opened up the possibilities that I see on the fly, just working with this.
If there's no more questions, thank you very much for your attendance. Another big hand for Dottie. Great job. And enjoy the rest of the convention.